What if China invaded Taiwan? Hello again everyone, welcome back to Hypotheticals. Sorry for the slight delay on this video. Like many of you, I've been busy with the holidays, spending time with my Stick family and friends, stuff like that. I was also sick for a time and couldn't record my voice because I sounded weird. I still kinda sound weird. I don't want to bore you with all the details, but Happy New Year to all of you. Also, we hit 2,000 subscribers. That's wild. Thank you all so much. Anyways, today we're talking about China, Taiwan, and the ever-growing conflict in the South China Sea. If you were paying extra close attention in my last video, you might have noticed that I teased this topic ever so slightly. While some countries aim to help a crippled America, other countries see it as an opportunity. I'm not a foreign affairs expert by any means, but something tells me that countries like Russia and China would see something like this occur and take every opportunity to take advantage of it. The US will be stretched super thin, so maybe China tries to invade Taiwan while this is all happening. Who knows? I wasn't expecting anyone to pick up on it though, it was kinda random. Also, that was some weird Stickmanception we had going on just now. Let's not do that again. So, if you didn't know, China and Taiwan kinda sorta hate each other and have hated each other for a really long time. China believes the island that Taiwan is on belongs to them, and the Chinese government goes as far as claiming Taiwan as their own territory and not officially recognizing the island nation as its own country. Quick side note, China is officially known to the world politically as the People's Republic of China, or PRC, while Taiwan is known politically as the Republic of China, or ROC. I'll likely address them as China and Taiwan throughout this video, but in case I randomly use one of these names, you now know why. For a very long time, China has vowed to unify the mainland country with its island counterpart, even if it means they need to use force. But why is this the case? Why does Beijing want to have control over Taiwan so badly? What would happen if China tried to take Taiwan by force? Before getting into a hypothetical invasion, let's first talk about some history, because spoiler alert, you'll need to know it for the rest of this video to make sense. China as a whole has an extensive history. I covered some of it in a really bad video that I made a while back. You can go watch it if you want, but to summarize, I break up China's history into two parts, ancient China and modern China. For the purpose of this video though, we'll be focusing only on modern China, aka the China of the last 100 years or so, with specific emphasis on the Chinese Civil War. Like I said, there's a ton of history to be covered here. I may miss some stuff, especially because I'm gonna give you the SparkNotes version of this whole thing. If you want to learn more, my sources are in the description. Are you ready? Let's get into it. Okay, to begin, let's travel back to the early 20th century. After the collapse of the Qing dynasty in 1911, China declared itself a republic in 1912. Sun Yat-sen was established as the country's first ever president and founded the Nationalist Party, Kuomintang, also known as KMT. Soon after this though, Sun resigns in favor of a man named Yuan Shikai. Shikai tried to reinstate the monarchy that had previously collapsed, but this failed. After his death in 1916, the country fell into a brief period of being ruled by various warlords. Not really ideal. And this is part of what led to the Chinese Communist Party being founded in 1921. That year, in Shanghai, Mao Zedong founded the CCP, and that would forever change global history. So now that you know a tiny bit about how these two parties got founded, let me give you even more info. The KMT and the CCP did not like each other. They never did. As soon as the CCP was founded, the KMT viewed them as a threat to their government, and rightfully so, honestly. Just a few years after the CCP was founded, fighting broke out between the two groups. China's early modern history is brutal, to put it lightly. Not only was the country decimated by the Japanese during World War II, but infighting between the KMT and the CCP also did immense damage to the country's collective psyche. Anyways, there was quite a bit of fighting that went on between the KMT and the CCP throughout the late 1920s and early 1930s, but all you need to know is that eventually the CCP came out on top. It wasn't until 1949 that the Chinese Civil War officially came to an end. Communists took control of mainland China, and Mao Zedong declared the country the People's Republic of China. Meanwhile, nationalists evacuated to, you guessed it, Taiwan. And that's where they've remained to this day. Taiwan's modern day government is a democracy, and they operate with a president, a vice president, and other positions like that. And I don't know if you figured this out by now, but there's a certain government that doesn't like democracy very much. It's the CCP. So now, Taiwan's democratic government is constantly operating under the watchful eye of mainland communist China. In recent years, China has stepped up its threats to Taiwan, with tensions increasing since the election of Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen in 2016. Tsai doesn't want to increase ties with the mainland, something that her predecessor tried to do. Basically, the CCP doesn't like her much either. These increased tensions have led to the CCP flying fighter jets close to the island hundreds of times and taking other aggressive actions. And this is where the prospect of war comes to mind. As I've previously mentioned, the CCP has vowed to reunify Taiwan with mainland China, even if it requires force. If China were to invade Taiwan, what would that look like? How would the world respond? Let's now simulate an invasion and see how things unfold. Just real quick, before we get into this invasion, I have to give a quick shout out to Johnny Harris for a great video he's already made on this exact topic. It was super helpful in making mine, so feel free to check it out in the description below. Okay, so to begin, China's got a law in place that's meant to prevent any part of China from seceding from the country, and to no one's surprise, it mentions Taiwan. In the portion where Taiwan is mentioned, the law states that if all efforts to peacefully reunify Taiwan with mainland China fail, China will use force instead. I've already sort of mentioned that, but what's important here is to recognize that if all else fails, China is basically required by law to invade Taiwan. On the island of Taiwan, support for reunification amongst the public is at an all-time low. The Chinese government has been trying to reunite the two lands for nearly 70 years. Where do things go from here? An invasion, of course. Here's the thing, China isn't able to be intimidated anymore. When they would try to mess with Taiwan in the past, like in the 1990s, the US would send warships into the Taiwan Strait to basically say stop that, and well, China would. But now China has an extremely modernized army and navy and is by all accounts a global superpower. So an invasion is definitely on the table. The US can't just try to intimidate China away from Taiwan anymore. It won't work. But how would China invade Taiwan? Crossing the 100-mile strait while maintaining the element of surprise wouldn't be easy. In fact, it would be downright impossible given the amount of eyes Taiwan has on the mainland. So that idea goes immediately out the window for the Chinese military. Instead, they just have to overpower them. In the weeks and months leading up to the invasion, there's increased military activity in the Chinese province of Fujian. More and more troops gather near the strait and military supplies are moved to the area. But how does the invasion begin? China's military has become extremely powerful over the past few decades, and as I've already sort of mentioned, they've loved showing that off to Taiwan by flying fighter jets right through Taiwan's no-fly zone. Basically just as a big middle finger to the island nation. The beginning of China's invasion would likely look something like that. A Chinese fighter jet would break through the no-fly zone, but instead of taking its usual middle finger path, it would turn toward the island and start firing. And it wouldn't be the only one. In this scenario, China launches hundreds of jets in an effort to take down Taiwan's defense systems. Alongside those jets are guided missiles, which are launched from the mainland and are used to further disable Taiwan's defenses. If China builds its attack power up enough, this first phase of the invasion could effectively knock out Taiwan almost entirely, aside from their main defense of the island. Basically, things are looking pretty bleak for the island nation. With anti-aircraft systems down, communications and radar disabled, and most military bases heavily damaged, Taiwan would be in big trouble. They'd likely be able to get some jets into the air to fight back and launch some missiles back at mainland China, but it probably wouldn't be enough. And remember, this is just the first step in China's invasion of the island. You might be thinking, at this point, the world has heard about this attack, right? Possibly, but also the full picture likely isn't out yet. If China is jamming communications on the ground, news of the attack wouldn't spread as quickly. Something that's also super fun about China, and this is another thing that I learned from Johnny Harris's video, is that they've created these little robots that can be used to repair space satellites remotely. However, it's also theorized that China could use this same technology to jam US spy satellites and prevent the US government from getting a full picture of what's going on with the invasion. So yes, part of this war is technically taking place in space. Crazy stuff, I know. But now let's get back to the ground. The US government has heard news of a Chinese invasion, but doesn't quite know how to respond because they don't know the full picture on the ground. Meanwhile, on the island of Taiwan, troops are being sent to the island's western beaches to set up defenses for the incoming assault of Chinese ground troops. All of this is happening within the first few hours of the first missiles being fired by Chinese jets. Whew, okay, let's take a breather for a second. Okay, let's go. The United States is being pulled into this war. Having previously vowed to defend Taiwan and not wanting their main rival in China to grow any stronger, the US military deploys ships from bases they have in the Pacific, mostly from ones in Japan and Guam. The main goal of these ships is to prevent more Chinese troops from reaching the beaches of Taiwan, but it soon escalates. It's very easy to see how this quickly becomes a much bigger conflict than just China invading Taiwan. Without help from the outside, China would likely be able to take the island pretty easily. The US doesn't want that, as Taiwan is in an extremely important position in the Pacific. Taking Taiwan would only further China's growth as a global superpower. If the US gets involved, which they likely will, China may start striking US military bases in order to prevent more ships and jets from coming to Taiwan's aid. If that happens, this whole war has the potential to explode into a global conflict, and we'll get to that more in a second. Of course, the Chinese government knows this. Is that what they would really want? Maybe not, but who knows? Again, by law, they're required to invade Taiwan if that's what it comes to. Would this really become World War III? If it did, let's talk about what that might look like. To begin this section, let me make one thing clear. The US is pretty much obligated in some way to help out Taiwan in this situation. While the US doesn't have a mutual defense treaty with Taiwan like they do with Japan and South Korea, other things like that do exist. The 1979 Taiwan Relations Act, which is still in effect today, quote, states that the United States shall provide Taiwan with arms of a defensive character and shall maintain the capacity of the United States to resist any resort to force or other forms of coercion that would jeopardize the security or social or economic system of the people of Taiwan. I am out of breath. In other words, the US is basically guaranteed to be providing weapons to Taiwan in this scenario. Pair that with comments from certain presidents, including Joe Biden, and we can get a pretty clear picture of what American involvement may look like. So now we've got the world's two biggest superpowers at each other's throats over this one island. Let's say this event happens in 2024, so we've got war in the Middle East, war in Ukraine, and now war in the South China Sea. What happens now? Let's hypothesize. All of these ideas are coming straight from my head, so fair warning, things might get dumb. My thoughts are based on research though, I promise. Anyways, let's get into it. With war now occurring on three fronts, the United States has been stretched unbelievably thin. Having already provided military aid to both Ukraine and Israel, the US is now sending troops to the Pacific to fight for Taiwan. Sensing the opportunity, China and Russia, who have become increasingly buddy-buddy in recent years, formalized their partnership by way of a military alliance, with China sending military help to Ukraine and Russia sending some to the Pacific. With the United States being a member of NATO, and since their military bases in the Pacific have been attacked, all members of NATO have now been pulled into the war due to Article 5 of their treaty, which can be seen on screen right now. That means there's now more than 35 countries being pulled into this war. In other words, we've basically got World War III on our hands. Fighting is taking place on three main fronts: Europe, the Middle East, and the Pacific. This sounds somewhat similar to how World War II went, with the only difference being that fighting took place in North Africa instead of the Middle East. Of course, this is just one of the many routes that this whole situation could go down. My personal hope is that we've all learned from our past mistakes and diplomacy would be the path chosen instead of all-out war. But I'm not too optimistic about that, hence why I'm here, speculating about World War III. If you're wondering how this war might go, I don't really have any idea. What I will say though is that the result would obviously change the course of human history forever. It could also change the balance of world power. If China and its allies won the war, the days of the American empire would probably be over. The US would still remain as a major powerhouse, but just like how they experienced a major economic boom following World War II, China would experience the same after this war. Again, this all hinges on China and its allies quote-unquote winning this war. If Taiwan was successfully defended, Russia was pushed out of Ukraine, and whatever was going on in the Middle East ended in peace, we could definitely see America remain in its current power position. But given current global trends, I just don't know how likely that is. Of course, we also need to talk about the prospect of nuclear annihilation. I kind of ignored it for this video, and I'm honestly going off script here. I don't see that happening. I'm not really sure though. I mean, who really knows? To be honest, it kind of felt like a cop-out answer to go that route, so I didn't. It could happen, but I'm gonna ignore it because it's just really not as interesting. You know, everyone dying, that's not fun. Although I don't even know what I'm saying because people still die in war, even if there aren't big bombs used. So let's just move on. Let's get, we're gonna wrap things up now. In all likelihood, a Chinese invasion of Taiwan will one day happen. How the world responds is what will determine whether we spiral into World War III or attempt to solve the problem via diplomacy. I'm not getting my hopes up though. Like all of my other videos, this one was just for fun. It's not meant to be taken super seriously. That being said, if you enjoyed it, please feel free to like and subscribe. Also, leave a comment if you want, whether it's about a video you want to see in the future, a way I can improve, or you just want to say hi. I appreciate all of them. If you want to learn more about China and Taiwan, I've linked my sources down in the description. Once again, I highly recommend Johnny Harris's video on this topic as it was super helpful in making mine. He goes more in depth on a whole bunch of stuff. It's definitely worth the watch. I do all of this research myself, and most of the time I come into these videos with little to no knowledge about the topic I'm talking about. If I missed something, I'm sorry about that. I'm always trying to improve. Alright, that's all I've got for this hypothetical. Hopefully I won't have as long of a break between now and my next video. Thanks again for watching and for 2,000 subscribers. Hope I see you next time.